Okay, welcome everyone. We're just about a minute past our start time. Looks like we have a few more people joining us, but we will get going. I know we have lots to talk about. Welcome to this session, which is from Cybersecurity Audit to Digital Transformation in a Mid and Post-Pandemic K12 World. Today we have with us Mac McMillan. He's an administrator for information technology from Beaverton School District, and also Fadi Fadil, who is the CIO of cybersecurity strategist at Palo Alto Networks. So we're excited to have both of these folks today. This is about hybrid classrooms, digital access and equity, secure network infrastructure is required of this next gen K-12 classroom. Beaverton School District has been working on lots of these things. As a pretty forward-looking group. Pretty excited to hear what Mac has to say and what Fadi can add to those things as well. So appreciate your time. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to turn this right on over to, I believe, Mac, you're going to be starting.
All right. Thanks. And thank you, everybody, for coming today. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about where we were before the pandemic and what we were kind of doing for cybersecurity in that time frame before the pandemic, and then kind of how we had to transition through the pandemic and how Palo Alto, as one of our partners, helped us achieve some of those goals. And then Fadi's going to talk a little bit about how Palo Alto has been working towards the education and really focusing some of their products really towards how they can help secure education. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Hopefully just a second, it'll pop up here. Can somebody put in the conversation tab if you can chat, if you can see the screen? I'll make sure everybody can see it. Thanks. It doesn't show on the AirMeet screen here, so just want to make sure everybody could see it. So when we started, I've only been in education about 2.5 years. Before that, I spent 24 years in the military. But when I came into the organization, one of the things we were looking at is bolstering our cybersecurity. And one of the avenues we took was getting an external security audit. So we partnered with one of our other partners, Presidio, to really get a security audit. And if you're not familiar with why you would need a security audit, sorry, my mouse is losing here. A security audit is a third party coming in to assess your security needs and where you're at security-wise and what improvements you can make. So some of the things our security audit covered was governance, risk and compliance, internal vulnerability assessment, internal penetration test, web application test, a wireless infrastructure assessment, and a security architecture analysis. So when they come in to do the security audit, they come in and really just assess everything you're doing and give it to you in a form that you can now have documentation on where you're lacking. As we know that in cybersecurity, there's always room for improvement. And getting a security audit is one of the best ways that you can see where you're at, because it's, as we as an internal organization, as we look at our cybersecurity, we may think that we're doing everything to protect ourselves. And when you have that non-biased third party come in to look at your infrastructure and see where those vulnerabilities are, it gives you those tools you need to move forward. When we talk about why you need a cybersecurity audit, kind of as I was just talking about, it's an unbiased look at your overall posture. Sometimes we get so close to our work inside the organization that we're not really, don't have that focused lens to look outside of what we're not doing, whether it's good or bad. It's just, we're so focused and so biased on we think we're doing good that sometimes having that third party look at your system and give you those tools you need to expand upon it is key. And I think one of the biggest avenues or why you would do a security audit is leverage for change. As we know, those of us with children know, we can tell our children something as many times as clear as possible, but then their friend says the same thing. And what happens? All of a sudden, it's like, oh my goodness, that was something we should be doing, or I didn't know I was doing that. So it's that getting that outside agency to say, hey, this is something you need to be doing to focus. It gives you that documentation. So when you go to your superintendent, you can say, hey, here's the things we need to do to bolster our cybersecurity. And for some reason, just like with kids, it makes a lot more sense when they see it from somebody else than somebody inside the organization. When we also look at an insurance requirement, as we know, the ransomware has been rampant all over the country, especially targeting K12. And I know here in Beaverton, Steve and I were just reviewing our cybersecurity insurance contract, because it's coming due for renewal again. And there's a lot of new requirements for us to get cybersecurity insurance. And having a security audit is starting to show up on some cybersecurity insurance carriers, that if you're not having a security audit periodically, that you're not going to be covered for things. And then it also provides you a roadmap for cyber defense. One of the biggest things with cybersecurity is, where do you begin and where do you need to take it? And as we look at that, having that documentation of these are the vulnerabilities that a company's seeing that could be used as attack vectors, having documentation of this is where you're doing well, this is not where you're doing well, or room for improvement, having that to develop your roadmap is key. So that way you can set out those short-term goals, those medium-term goals, and those long-term goals of where you want to be in cybersecurity and meeting those requirements. As we did our security audit, obviously with any organization, there's going to be some identifying things in there that need to be strengthened or hardened. So what we did is we partnered with Palo Alto, who we've been partners with for close to 8 to 10 years now, to look at how Palo Alto and our current systems with Palo Alto could help us achieve some of those goals that we outlined in our security roadmap after we did our audit. So some of the key things we're using off of our Palo Alto is user ID control. So we're able to map groups with user ID to control what access users have to within the firewall roles. So within the firewalls themselves, we can use user ID control, which is mapped to our AD, to be able to isolate what access users have within the firewall. Threat prevention, threat and virus profiles are I misspelled that, are automatically updated every 15 minutes within our firewall. So anytime Palo Alto sees something that is flagged as malicious or a virus, they're automatically updating that, and it's not something we as a customer have to go in and do manual patches and updates. It's automatically updated directly into our firewalls. URL filtering, they're constantly identifying URLs and identifying categories that are known as bad web content, and being able to block those without us having to do anything. One of the biggest things we utilized, especially as we moved into the pandemic with remote work, was traffic controls and being able to block outside IP addresses from anything outside of the US. We saw probably a 20 to 25% drop in junk traffic trying to access our network when we implemented geo-blocks for outside of the United States. Known IPs, blocking IPs from known malicious sites. Logging is a big one. We use our logging to trace quite a few things, but one of the advantages we've had with being able to log everything through the firewall was we had an incident where we had a staff member doing some not so great things, and we were, of course, they were trying to say that they didn't do it from their work computer, and we were actually able to use the firewall logs to see what addresses they were going to and be able to trace that back all the way to their computer. And then, of course, one of the biggest things the Palo Alto gives us is SIPA compliance, which for those of us who use E-rate is a huge thing, because if we're not in SIPA compliance, we don't get that extra money we need to be able to support connectivity for our students. As we were moving through the pandemic, one of the big things that came about was on March 10th, our governor here in Oregon said, I believe it was March 10th, said we were closing down schools. And on top of just closing down schools and not having students in the building, our district made the decision that we were going to put all staff remote as well. We were not ready for that. We did not even fathom that, as most school districts. I think we're in the same boat, that we were not expecting to ever have that many staff members working remotely. So what we were able to do is we scrounged and pulled every computer we could find to get staff members online, but we still had to get them connected. And with our Palo Alto firewalls, we were able to move over 5,000 staff members to remote in less than a week. One of the advantages was we were able to tie those rules to our Active Directory, so we didn't have to go recreate those rules in the firewall for VPN access. We were able to tie those directly to our Active Directory rules we already had in place and be able to get our staff operational fairly quickly. Now, it wasn't seamless. It wasn't without hurdles, because anytime you try to move that many staff members and try to make sure that the access they need is correct, it's just never going to go right the first time. But with support from Palo Alto, we were able to get those services up and our staff connected. One of the big ways this helped us is we started a student help desk. And as we started our student help desk, our VoIP phone system is behind our authentication is on our network, our internal network, and we don't have it set for external users to be able to access outside of the organization. So as we went through, we were able to start connecting all our teachers through VPN, so they were able to contact students through their VoIP phones. Another thing we were able to do is we identified a need that we did not have enough multilingual speaking staff in our own staff to be able to communicate with our families. So we were able to set up VPN for staff members. We had bus drivers, custodians, groundskeepers, all connecting with our families. And we were able to do that by being able to quickly get VPN to these clients, so that these other staff members were able to contact our families. We were able to contact over 5,000 families within a week and a half to get them connected to internet, get them hotspots if they needed to, help them with general questions on how to log into their Chromebooks, make sure their students were set up for success to be able to continue distance learning. Another big thing was the geo-blocking, which I kind of talked about earlier. So with our Palo Alto being able to geo-block, one of the things we saw throughout this pandemic is we had a lot of staff and a lot of students that were going overseas. and we were able to geo-block and protect some of our critical services from being attacked, even though we were able to give them some services through geo exceptions through Azure. We were able to take those critical services that we want to ensure that are secured and not provide access to those with our Palo Alto. One of the things as we went through our security audit, one of the things we identified was we really need to know, use all the tools that we have currently and make sure we're using all those tools correctly. And one of the things as we were going through our security audit and we started talking with Palo Alto about how we can improve some of those things we identified in the security audit was that there were free tools with Palo Alto that we weren't even taking advantage of. And some of those are, one of the things was a best practice assessment. So within our firewall software, we're able to go through and evaluate what we're doing with what are best practices in industry with NIST, with CIS standards, and be able to see what we're doing in compared to what those recommended standards are. It's a valuable tool. And some of them, as with anything, it's organizational needs. So there are some things in there that we're doing really well on. There's some things we need to improve on. And there's some things that as best practices, it's a best practice, but it just doesn't really fit in our organization. But what it does is it gives us a really good visual representation of where we are as a district in cybersecurity with industry standards. Another thing is the security lifecycle review. And what it allows us to do is really go through our system and see what we're actually using and where we could improve. These are both part of what we're already paying for with our Palo Alto service. And it's one of those things I would say with a cybersecurity audit, before you go out and buy new stuff, is really work with your vendors that you're already working with and understand what services that are already included in what you're already paying for and to be able to do that. One of the things I think that's made us so successful with Palo Alto is where they have a focus in how they can have and a focus in how education's moving. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Fadi, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of their education roadmap and where they're really seeing that they can help education organizations secure their networks. Fadi, I'll go ahead and quit screen sharing. So I think you had some slides you wanted to share.
All right, thank you. Sharing slides. All right, can you see my slides?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Well, hello everyone. Glad to be here today. My name is Fadi Fadel. I'm a cybersecurity strategist here with Palo Alto. Prior to joining Palo Alto, I served as the CIO for the city of Minneapolis, also the CIO for Minneapolis Public Schools. And with that came quite a good experience and lessons learned that I would like to share with you today. As we chat about cybersecurity in the K12 today's world, and why is this such a hot topic that some people might go to the extent of calling it a cybersecurity crisis? We'll talk about strategies to address it, and most importantly, it's how to organize this information in our head, so so it doesn't become such a black hole and a complicated topic, but rather more organized about how do we look at it and how do we connect those dots. I won't be going much into a technical level, but more of a strategic high level, maybe a bit of leadership view, tips and hints on how to handle this. And if you hear anything today that you like and you want to hear more about the technicalities and down to the details of the technology, how to make it happen, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. There's no silver bullet around this topic, but if you find one, please do share with us, because in the cybersecurity world, sharing intel is our best and most important ally. And we will start by talking about the Simon Sinek, for those who are familiar, has a really good TED Talk that talks about the 3 golden circles. And he criticizes how we always tend to talk about the what and the how and then why you need it, versus the idea is really we need to talk about why are we talking about cybersecurity, and then the how, and then we talk about what actions to take. So let's start with the why. And I've had this conversation recently with a colleague, a K12 leader, who was sharing some of his challenges, being the board members were not necessarily up to speed about why they're investing more in cybersecurity, and why they were doing so good for all that time. Why are we looking at cybersecurity and throwing so much money into it? And that got us to the point around how do we communicate the why? How do we communicate such a convoluted situation around cybersecurity and make it understandable in educational language? So it really came down and broke down to 3 elements of what has changed. Targeted cyber attacks, the educational technology, and the environment. So when we look at the targeted cyber attacks, we have, last time I checked, this number was 1,100. Now it's 1,180, and that was like a couple of months ago. So we have 1,180 K12 targeted attacks, not just public sector. Since 2016, that number tripled in 2019 alone from what it was in 2018, hitting 366 districts and 44 states. In 2020, there's a lot of information around what's going on, but I think people are still counting. On the screen, you can see some of these statements and joint alerts that are trying to get people's attention to this problem, and how much we need to be more having more sense of urgency around tackling the asymmetry between the offense and the defense. A couple of things that are interesting to look at here. These are only disclosed attacks. This is not everything. K12 is not necessarily mandated to disclose when they were targeted with an attack. And a good thing to look at here is what are the contributing factors that made this wave become so big. Of course, the tidal wave came in 2020 for reasons that are obvious with the pandemic and going digital or going remote. But mainly over the past 3 years too, the attacks have gotten cheaper. They've gotten more automated. There's a lot of AI involved. It's machines attacking people, not people attacking people anymore. And with them being cheaper and simpler, you have an expanded number of attackers. Some of them are not even cyber criminals. They're basically students who don't want to go to school or wanting to change their grades or want to kind of have a snow day or a day off, and they just DDoS their school. So the waters have changed. Yes, we are still swimming in the same bay, but there are sharks here, and the sharks are smelling blood. Unfortunately, a lot of the 2020, 2021 attacks are successful, and districts are paying up. Moving on to the second element, and that's the educational technology. So on the educational technology front, we have an explosion in SaaS and cloud services. And there's a matching appetite from school districts and from the education realm to take on these services. I remember back in 2006, we were working with online testing and trying to get teachers and trying to get the academic folks to take on technology, but they were pushing back and saying, well, computers and computer labs are not going to replace the paper pencil. Well, guess what? We're not talking about that anymore. We're saying laptops are the new classroom. So we do like this, and we do like this appetite for technology. And even from an IT leader perspective, we like that cloud and SaaS approach, because even from a data center standpoint, we don't want to manage all these services and all these technologies and the upgrades and the hardware and the engineers to to maintain them. However, this presents, there's a price to doing business. There's a price to engage in technology. What this presents are some challenges that we have to take into account. So we got the visibility issues, whether it's encrypted traffic from SaaS or the cloud. We can't see those packets that are going through, where it could be malware, or even visibility over some keywords like free and reduced lunch, cyberbullying, self-harm. Those things are becoming an issue. And with the more appetite for using educational technology, now we have the attack surface has gotten bigger and wider. So few schools of thought around here, and we'll get to that, around combining IT and educational technology, or having some collaboration between IT and educational technology, because this piece here presents a challenge around governance. And it doesn't make sense to secure a house when you have tenants there that are leaving the doors or the back doors or the windows open, and they're not even telling you about it. So not just a visibility standpoint from a cybersecurity perspective, but also from an alignment within the district perspective around what technologies are we getting. Do you just go ahead and get it? Well, you might have a budget or a P card that allows you to get that system or that tool that you saw in a conference, and with that, there's needs to be a few more considerations organizationally in addition to the technology piece. And moving on to the third leg of what has changed, and that is the K12 environment. Remote learning is the new norm. We all know that. Actually, technology and technology transformation is the new norm. What happened since 2020 is a mandatory digital transformation that shot all school districts 5 years into the future. This is a good thing. This is the reform that we've been trying to do. And I feel that education reform can only happen when you're leveraging also technology, because we've been doing all the other things, but technology can bring things to the next level and make us more relevant to our students who are living in a digital, increasingly digital world. Now, when we look at this environment, this is how we're engaging the digital world right now. And the hybrid learning is the new norm. And now you have every network to worry about, not just yours. You have to worry about homes and coffee shops, in addition to your school. You have every device to worry about, whether it's your lab devices, one-on-one devices, the personal devices that staff and students are using at home, and even cell phones. And we'll talk a little bit about the IoT, but let's start thinking about these Rokus and Apple TVs and all these donations that are coming from parents. So with that, when you look at this, it begs the question, how do I know what investments to make, and how do I know I am making a difference? How do I know that my investment is actually getting me a good bang for my buck? So these are the three aspects that changed, especially since 2020, and we cannot focus only on one angle. That is the big problem. Ad hoc and focusing on one aspect of it is where things go south, or where the investment doesn't really pay off. And that's how attacks happen, securing one area while neglecting the other. Especially when, as I dealt with that situation, I have razor-thin staff. FTEs are so hard to find or to come by, let alone getting the right expertise from a cyber security perspective. And you got people as the multiplier of a risk here now, because you got a bit of digital fatigue from having to watch out for all of these things. So having that said, what is the next best thing to do? We simplify. The reason is, so we're not paralyzed by complexity, and also so we can communicate to our districts so they can understand this, and it doesn't become just an IT burden, but actually gets a good sense of support, and it doesn't become an IT thing, but a we thing. So, and of course, that communication is important to get your funding as well. And finally, critical to that communication is that it's done in an education language. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that works. So if I were to communicate the overall technical aspects of it, I will say, here's what's going on. With the icons you're seeing on the left, that's what we know. These are the tactics that the bad actors are using, whether it's phishing, identity theft, malware, scanning, spamming, and zero-day attacks. But what do you have at stake? What are the valuables that makes me, as a district leader, as a superintendent, as a board member, or as the CFO, why should I care? Well, your district systems can be held ransom. That's interruption of education. Your student and staff information can be vulnerable to the outer world. I really like this statement around laptops are the new classroom, because we do everything to secure the classroom. But with the digital world, we're putting our students one to the world. So that is more of a reason why we should protect their identity. When it comes to district data, unfortunately, the bad actors now are really aware of how things work, and they do not necessarily need to take your system hostage. They just get a copy of your free and reduced lunch and extort you with publishing those publicly if you do not comply with their demands. Of course, some of them are using that to access other government, but back to the education piece, that learning experience, it's why we do cybersecurity. In addition to our due diligence and continuity of education and safety of education, the learning experience around having accessible technology, not cumbersome, easy to log into, agile, scalable. When there's a need for the district, let's say you have some good IT governance practices in place, still your district is not going to give you a whole lot of space to accommodate a new technology from a cyber perspective, and those things are happening really quick. So we know the difference now. What we used to have 2 and 3 years to do, now we have to do in 2 and 3 months. So having that said, when we look at the holistic picture of all of that, we are talking about the trust. That is what's at stake. That is what's at stake. So we know of situations where the tech leader says, yeah, the bad actors, got here, but I got all my backups, my systems are up and running. However, you'll see the superintendent or the CFO being in favor of paying that ransom because they got a copy of the data. That data goes on the news. That is the trust. Well, I would not send my kids to a swimming pool that doesn't have a lifeguard. And of course, that becomes such a burden on the rest of the district's relationship with the community, academic achievement, reputation, and all the good things that are happening can just go away with one bad news that goes out there. So where would I go next? Well, this is a time for a fresh new start. And I would reset the stage. So sorry, I didn't advance that slide. So what's at risk is right now on the screen. Those are the things that I went through just now. And then setting the stage. So I would set the stage by seizing the opportunity and rejuvenate the cybersecurity program. You do this through having more district leadership briefings, even if they don't ask for it. Highlight the following. Highlight that the role has changed. Let them be aware you are their best shot at knowing how the cyber world is working now. So in simple language, let them know that, never before 2020, we heard of school districts shutting down completely due to a cyber incident. That cybersecurity went from a technical value to now a strategic value. And the superintendent and the CFO and the board members should care. Also, communicate the mission and vision directly in education language. In front of you have a sample statement of a mission and vision, but I would just highlight to you the secure, safe, and positive learning experience. So this is at the end, not really about cybersecurity, it's about safe, secure, and positive learning experience. These three will include all of them. And when we say the piece about positive learning experience, we're highlighting that we're not just doing cybersecurity because we're preventing something bad from happening. Well, first people used to say, to prevent something bad that might happen. No, it's happening, and it's happening a lot and very frequently, unfortunately. But we need to do this anyway. That is part of our job. That is the digital transformation. That is part of us enabling education. And there is a value to that. And as you set the stage, make sure that you're constantly communicating the state of your cyber program and your cyber plan. Keep it on top of mind. And we're going to talk a little bit here about what does the cyber plan looks like. So let's go with the good old Deming cycle. Plan, do, check, act. And we all know the statement, if you failing to plan is planning to fail. And I'm going to focus on the planning portion of it because I do feel this is the most important. Where would you start? Or if you have already had a start, where can you do that rejuvenation, that reignitation of your plan? First, you assess your current state. There are multiple formats and frameworks, and even stuff that services that Palo Alto provides that Mac talked about earlier that helps you assess your current state. Identify where you're not happy with your current state, where are your weaknesses, and then prioritize them. And the prioritization becomes something that you align with. Where are your valuables and what are your district initiatives? What is the strategic plan saying in the next 2 or 3 years, where you're going? And that's going to help you prioritize so that you can secure funding. Keep it alive. The plan is cyclical. It needs updates. It needs to stay alive. And every time you update it is your opportunity to do a state of the cyber or state of the data for the district. And the plan allows you to communicate trackable, measurable goals. So when you fall into a cyber debt, it's not on you alone. You can, if the funding rotation misses you for a cycle or two, then you can say, hey, here's the updated plan. Now I'm behind on this and this and this. And cyber debt is the new technology debt, and we should not miss the ship on this one, the train on this one. And of course, you got the expectation setting. So it's not, during funding or, the internal funding wars, you're coming in and saying, I need this and that. It needs to stay top of mind. And then you can also communicate the check boxes. Well, I had weaknesses around my cyber posture in this area, or the looking into encrypted traffic and whatnot. Then you can report back and say, hey, this is your investment. Now you can see the return of that investment, and you have something to share publicly, or give something to the superintendent to share, or to the IT leader to share, to say, hey, I'm glad to declare, because of this investment and attention to cybersecurity, that my posture in terms of student and staff safety or cyberbullying or exposure to bad content had went from 3 to 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. Thank you for that investment. This is going to, empower our relationship with our communities and the students we serve in terms of trust. And then let's take that plan and take those 3 things. The assess. We talked about that just a second ago. Maturity levels can be assessed through, you got NIST, C2, M2, you got the cybersecurity maturity model. There are others. One of them I'm going to just talk to you about today because I'm really going after the simplification, so we're not paralyzed by that complexity. Second, you baseline it. Whatever you get from that maturity level, do document it and keep a track record of it. And you can go even the extra mile, which is going to help you secure funding or at least rally more support. Benchmark against the K12 in the nation and against similar K12s. If you have a relationship with neighboring K12s, do sit down together and do leverage that. That is a good conversation to have. And you can benchmark in terms of percentages. Hey, how much of your district budget is being spent on IT? And how much of that is being spent on cybersecurity? How much of our CARES funding is being spent on? Get that percentage, get that number. Once you set a number, once you start measuring, the universe will start reacting differently. You can also measure in terms of FTEs. How many FTEs, or a fraction of an FTE to how many of the student count? Identify your valuable assets. You identify where your data is. You do not build a safe around the whole house. You identify where your assets are, and you keep them as much as possible in that safe. And so your valuables basically are your student and staff. Those are our most important folks that we need. To me, I see them as an asset worth protecting. The data, their data, our data, the important data, the valuables that need to be in the safe, and the systems that are going to keep the learning going. And you can look at the top two: business systems and learning systems. So you could look at your finance system, whatever, using SAP, PeopleSoft, or whatever. And then you got your learning systems, your LMS, and of course, mainly the SIS, if you have those two separate. And based on that, prioritize. Definitely look at compliance. If you're behind on compliance, you shouldn't even be listening to this webinar. You should be going to look at compliance. That is our accountability. Look at the overall risk portfolio based on this information you calculated or collected, and then have the district priorities, whether it's online learning, remote access, social emotional learning, MTSS, or if you're leveraging Ed5 for data, to kind of give you that what should I do, or where should I hit next. Now that you've done that, your plan should include the following 4 elements. And again, you'll see a lot of stuff out there that goes really into the depth of what that should look like. But I'll give you an example around around an IT strategic plan that we had. And we've had IT strategic plans in a former district for years, and they never done anything. They just sat and collected dust because we wrote them like essays. We put everything that needs to be done there. So instead of being aspirational, it became inspirational, and we could not do it. So keep it simple. The roadmap is what are the capabilities and investments you're going to do next. And we're going to unpack this here in a second. Have a business continuity plan. Just put a stake in the ground. Doesn't need to be long. It's a business continuity plan. Your disaster recovery, if you have a backup plan, or if you just know where your stuff is and what's backed up and how long does it take you to get it back. And is the backup disconnected? Or if something gets infected, the backup's getting affected as well. Just start having these conversations and plug them into that version 1, version 2, version 3 of the plan. Your incident response. Do you have incident response tools? Are you planning on getting any? If you don't, what is the plan here? If an attack happens, the roles and responsibilities are going to be huge and very, very important. And having that type of practice when things happen, you do not need to be all over the place. You're going to need people to be with you. Even invite folks outside of IT, like the communications folks. Hey, if an attack happens, we're going to need to have something ready for the union. We're going to need something to have ready for the staff, and we're going to need something to have ready for the public. And what's the depth of, you shouldn't be thinking about that during an attack where your first 5 hours are the most important hours. And as Mac covered, that's where your vulnerability testing falls in place. Have one, do one. If you don't have one, if you can't afford to have one, just put it on the plan so you can say, I haven't done a vulnerability test. The plan is not to show what we're not doing. The plan is to show what do we need to be keeping track of, so the conversations, every time you talk about cybersecurity investments, you don't have to start from scratch. You just pull the plan and have people remember what we talked about. Cyber insurance has a conversation of its own. There are 2 types of cyber insurance. There's the cyber insurance as we know it, and that is, it's after the fact. You may get reimbursed, but it won't reimburse the trust. And that's why I like the cyber insurance that we're talking about now, which is proactive, and it instills trust. Even when nothing is happening, at least your stakeholders know that you're paying attention when they hear all these attacks happening right and left, and wonder, I wonder where my district is. Policy. Start having those pieces and documented, and start one step at a time. This is not throwing the ball, this is running the ball game, and it's a journey, not a destination. We all know that. So there are a lot of policies that you can look at, but on the screen you are looking at, these are my favorites, and they've made a night and day difference for me. First, vendor vetting. The vendor vetting, what you have is an existing vendors that are having some ETLs or some integrations and getting some of your information that is important. Normally we don't vet them, or historically we haven't vetted them as well. So vetting them now and asking them, how are you being compliant with all these things, is a good it's a good practice. Do it cyclically and just update your contracts, and know that a lot of the natively or the out-of-the-box security is built in a lot of services or cloud services doesn't cut it. And that's how it's actually happening right and left as we speak with that weak link. So you want to have that. So that's the existing. Procurement. And this is where procurement and governance go hand in hand. You cannot be herding cats here. You cannot be in a situation where you got all the shadow IT working against you, and you don't want to be also in a place. We like to say we want to be the department. IT want to be the department of no with a K, not of no as in no. So how do you solve this problem? Because everybody finds what they need and they need it now. They actually need it yesterday and they got everything lined up and the support and the funding. It's only the IT folks who won't let me. Why are they against education? So the best ally in terms of relationship building that I have found had been the CFO, because they are invested in not buying all kinds of stuff. They are invested in not having redundancies or you know, we can't afford for everybody to get their own car. We're just going to have to buy one bus and we all get there. So whether it's redundancy, whether it's compliance, whether it's actually from a risk management perspective, I'm not going to introduce new technologies before I vet them. That's where you could declare IT governance, try to get people to the table, try to get superintendent's approval of it or support of it. But then what's going to make it happen is having that plugged into the procurement process. So the finance people, whenever they see a purchase that is going, that is IT related or has to do with data, it needs to be vetted by your IT governance structure. It's a group. 2 or 3 people, have someone from cyber, if they're the same as infrastructure, cyber infrastructure, have someone from academics and have someone from educational technology. This way it's a we thing, not an IT thing. I would, out of all the policies, I would do a very special policy for cloud and SaaS, because that is where we're all going to be going. And even your existing vendors are probably going to be sooner than later pressuring you to move to their cloud version of it. And this is where we have a lot of issues with how that traffic is going, and we need to start investing in those. Finally, training. 2 forms here: training your staff, whether it's phishing campaigns here and there, or whether it's onboarding. You can create those phishing training or material and have it to academics and have it built it into their staff PD in a cyclical manner, and work with HR to include that in the onboarding material. For the IT staff, keep them educated, keep them aware, whether you send them to conferences, whether you have some study sessions with them, or whether I used to have, you know, every time we have a staff meeting, we'd volunteer somebody to do a research about a topic and go and come present to the group. The most important training here in the cybersecurity space for IT staff relates to the incident response, and that is tabletop exercises. Who does what when an incident happens? That is super important. Otherwise, you're going to have a kitchen with all kinds of chefs running and butting heads around, and you're going to be managing that instead of you should be managing the communication around it, and make sure that you have the right resources available. For tabletop exercises, there's a lot that can be talked about. We can also help you with a lot of those, show you what it looks like. It could be actually a topic for a future webinar. Having these conversations will lead you to being able to make that first, or just make 3-year plan, achievable milestones related to each one of them, and have them in a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or if you want to do it year 1, year 2, year 3, and you can use the SMART as a guideline: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Again, keep it simple, don't overdo it. You are not checking a box or achieving a goal. You are getting the organization to learn a skill, and to be cyber secure is a skill. So I'm going to pivot here a little bit and talk a little bit about how that would look on the outside. How would I sell this to my district? How do I get that support? How do I get all of this to be in a technology language? So I feel that what you're looking at and that 3-legs tool does cover a lot, and actually it's inclusive of almost all of it. And we've gotten a lot of success from state superintendents, from superintendents, board members, CIOs love this, IT leaders love this, because it really gets it down to, listen, everything I'm doing, it has to do with education. Safety of education, I'm keeping my staff and students safe from bad content, cyberbullying, scams, credential theft, self-harm. Continuity of education, that's your single points of failure, that is, which can be the data center. Now, when we look at how the environment have changed, you cannot afford to have a single point of failure, especially if you're hauling all the VPN traffic back to the data center. Enablement of education, and that is your agility, your scalability, and enablement of having access to technology like cloud and SaaS offerings. And it's all about finding the right balance, as it's not one size fits all. So if I take that stool and break it into, I'm going a little technical here, but break it into, okay, how do you tie cybersecurity products or cybersecurity capabilities to those? You can see it in front of you. DNS URL, phishing, cyberbullying, or even awareness and training, that is safety of education. Even the SaaS and the cloud and what hides in that traffic, that is my safety for staff and students. If I look at the continuity, all of the above, whether it's IoT, endpoint protection, automation, and zero trust, incident response, all of these elements, as you see which ones are going to be your next priority, can directly be linked to continuity of education. And the enablement of education, that is your being able to look at data privacy and feel that you're good in terms of a data-centric security posture. That's where zero trust is going to show up again. Again, we're going to see SaaS and cloud, and you can see some of the, or even looking into encrypted traffic, but you can see some of the asterisks on some of those. I actually feel I can put asterisks on most of them because they can be interchangeable, or better yet, it could be 2 or 3 in one. So, hey, I really need to invest in getting that decryption capability, because it's going to help me not with the continuity of education and stop potential ransomware or infiltration, but it also is going to help me with the safety of education, because I can look at that traffic and see if they look for bullying, self-harm, or even if there's free and reduced lunch data sheet that is being shared through a Google Doc, between a bunch of people within the school, and we all know that scenario as well. I don't know how much time allows us to talk to digital equity and defending together component, but if we have time, I would be happy to jump into that. But as you look at this, I highly encourage folks to take a second and try to look at some of those capabilities and rate yourself. Are you in the red? Are you in the amber? Are you comfortable? You just invested in that. Are you in the green? Is that working out well for you? And then also, when you look at it from that perspective, you're looking at maturity, and also it gives you a sense of, if I were to prioritize, which one am I going to go after first? And as you do that exercise, and you can do that with your staff, you can also, it's going to beg itself to say, okay, so what would be my second priority? What would be my third priority? And there you have that type of thinking around, okay, I need to have a 3-year plan, or 3-phase or 3-step maturity thing that I can report on and project to the district what kind of investments we need here, because there are multiple first steps to take. But the most powerful first step to take is one that you already know what step 2 and 3 are going to look like. I'm going to talk really quick here about zero trust, because some folks take that and tie it to, you know what, my overarching philosophy is zero trust, and I want to be mindful of how do I connect that to the previous slide. And that's where we talk about zero trust I really connect zero trust with data centric, because data centric would prioritize where you bring your zero trust model to maturity. So it's follow the data. And in front of you, you can see something that a lot of K12s, all of K12s can relate to, where the systems and the access and the functionalities on the right correlate to the arrow that, you know, the higher on top you go, the more sensitive the data is and the more serious we have to be about securing it. Others wanted to talk about IoT and how do I make sense of the IoT situation? Again, everything is happening so fast, and that's why a plan needs to be put in place so you can have something to update versus you have to update actions. Was that action the right one? Was that actually the wrong one? Well, I invested in this, then I got attacked that way. Is it on me that I invested in this first? There's no way that you can tell. And that's why having that plan allows you to say, I am advancing my entire posture. Is it fast enough? Not fast enough? There are some factors that play into that, and I would like the district support in doing this. And of course, that's support and funding. But when in terms of IoT, it's becoming, every day it's becoming a bigger issue with the K12. And I like the word, it's not Internet of Things, it's Internet of Threats. What we have discovered and found that is very valuable is as K12s are securing their educational technology tools, which a lot of those can qualify as IoT, or the security technology with door locks and whatnot, or energy control and savings for heat and temperature in the classroom or in facilities, from a facility standing point. The side benefit to that showed up is that a lot of K12s are challenged because asset management does take a lot of discipline, and it's a tedious process, that they love the idea that I'm using this report that I can get back from my IoT capability as asset management. And I know what device is doing what, and I can put in policy that automates it per any type of device. Like if you're a security camera, you have no business pinging every server in the district, and that happens a lot. So that gives you a little bit of peace of mind. In addition, it gives you more visibility around what devices are people bringing into your district, the ones that you don't know of, and the ones that you know of, which ones still have the password set as change me, and others that are not necessarily technology, like facility stuff. You know, your IT governance is not going to catch that, but this will catch it. So I kind of could use a ping here. How much do we have left on time? Are we ending in 1 minute?
I think we have a couple more minutes, Spotty.
Okay, so I'll make it quick. The turning challenges into opportunities. The slide is in front of you, but I would highlight the number one thing is the FTE. That is the biggest challenge that we have. And the second biggest challenge that we have is the complexity of the environment. What you're looking at has a solution, and this is why we highly advise to invest in next generation security and look at cybersecurity not from an ad hoc perspective, but from a whole platform perspective. But if we're talking about the two biggest challenges, automation and context are your best friend. And you want to look at how you engage in your tools and with your vendors. We like to always say tools before strategy are headed for tragedy. So we used to talk about what are the vulnerabilities and what needs to be done about them. Well, what needs to be done about them now is the challenge, because your staff will never get to all of it. And automation of that action, it is your best friend. And in terms of context, an alert or two may not mean anything until you put them in context with that email breach that coincided, a couple of days later with some access rights changing, coincided with some data moving that should not be moving. And I really like this slide, because even if you have the tools, and even you have, multiple panes of glass, which we don't like, your staff will never have time to do the CSI work. And context is huge in this scenario to help you be successful and impactful. And that's why I really like this slide, because it shows you the power of the platform. You don't have to go get every tool and every vendor out there on the market. You can have something that corresponds with your needs. A platform approach expands according to your needs. Like, if I want Microsoft Word today, but I know that things are changing, I'm going to need Excel and Access, I go get Microsoft Office Word, because I know the other pieces, I just enable them. And there's a context piece, not just the automation, which the platform does for you as well, but that efficiency of these different tools talking to each other, and it gives your staff an automated position on these two incidents and how they relate to each other. Finally, we go back to the education space and bring those elements together and communicate a cybersecurity plan, and keep bringing it up, so the cyber debt is not your issue alone. And your objectives here is, you got the three legs. What is the value? Communicate so students can ABC. What is the goal? I'm going to bring this new capability, or I'm going to do this adjustment, I'm going to write this new policy. Give it a timeline. It's okay to give it a timeline, because when you miss it, then it's not just on you. The district has a reminder. Identifying funding sources. We have a whole different talk track around tips and tricks around funding, and how to find funding, and how to deal with that internally, and how to handle the internal funding wars. And we're running out of time, so this is for a different conversation. Make sure you highlight who's in charge, like in a RACI model, who's sharing those responsibilities with you. If you're writing a policy, it might be general counsel. If it's something around procurement, academics needs to be involved. And of course, my favorite one is at the end, communicate the risks of what happens if you don't do so. So that decision, we always talk about cybersecurity, like, well, the leadership should decide whether we take on that risk or not. Yeah, but how are you going to communicate that? This is a simple format where they can, yep, I don't care about this, I don't care about this. Like, all right, well, we have until next year to look into how our investments are. Let's hope nothing happens. And that helps you not be in this alone. So with that, I'm just going to wrap up here. We still got some exciting stuff to cover around funding tactics, bridging the digital divide. And we have some new and exciting solutions that allows us to get internet at the homes of students and families, disadvantaged students and families, in a very affordable manner. And there's success stories around the nation that are leveraging Palo Alto and doing so. If you're curious about the digital divide and the opportunity divide and what we're doing about that, we'd be happy to share with you the private LTE and how we're leveraging that. You don't even need to purchase a separate bandwidth for that. You can leverage your own bandwidth in a secure way. And finally, the Defend Together model and how we're using or leveraging some cyber fusion centers and our approach to automate that, where multiple districts can share information in an automated manner. So with that, I'll stop, and I apologize for going over time.
Thanks, Fadi. There was a question in the chat here from Rob, wondering what your thoughts are investing in mitigation strategies over purchasing cyber insurance. And I think from my view, I think it's kind of, you have to balance both. Unfortunately, we can, whatever we do in throwing mitigation strategies, I mean, that's always the ultimate goal, is to prevent that attack. But at the same time, no matter how much money or resources we throw at it, unless we literally unplug all of our devices and we go back to strict paper and no internet and no technology, we're never going to stop all the attack vectors where we might need that cyber insurance on the backside.
Here's how I process it, and this is how I processed it with my leadership, both in the city and in the school system. Do you wear a seatbelt first, or do you get car insurance? We do tend to do both, but you cannot invest in the cyber insurance alone and bypass the mitigation strategies. Actually, I would look into mitigation strategies first and put something there, and then add cybersecurity until I keep maturing my mitigation strategies. And know there's a relationship between those two, because once you get into the cybersecurity piece, the cyber insurance piece, you got that premium, and that gets visited annually. So if you're behind on your mitigation strategies, get yourself to a place that is acceptable, at least, or medium. Get that cyber insurance. Keep elevating your mitigation strategies, and every year revisit that premium with your cyber insurance, because you can hold them accountable and say, when we got this premium, I did not have SSL decryption. This year I do. So what is that going to do to my premium? And have that go forth this way. The worst thing you can do is just put all your eggs in the cyber insurance basket, because even if all of that plays out well, how are you going to stay out of the news? And what is that going to do to the relationship and enrollment with the district? That is the trust element that is more valuable than the insurance itself.
I'm not sure if we have other questions. I'll ask one until I can see some more. I'll go back in the Q&A as well. So speaking of a superintendent, as a superintendent, which is my day job, what is it that you're going to tell me to help me explain to my board why we need to invest so much money in the mitigation strategies and these other things that don't look like stuff for kids or stuff for teachers, right? End user tools. Why wouldn't I just bet that it'll be cheaper for me to try to redo things later and try to recover them? Why would I invest so much, what it looks like so much money, even though what you've just explained in your talk is not? But if I hadn't sat through that talk, what is it you're going to tell me to help me budget for that, and then explain it to a managing board who may not have any idea how schools actually work?
So I love that. Thank you so much for that question. So I would immediately tie it to the education value here. We have to do this anyway. Technology is everywhere, and this is where we're can actually move the district goals forward. So if we know we're going to be driving, investing in roads is not a bad idea, and we can invest in the immediate roads. And we know as our city expands, we invest in more roads. So this is that. We're doing this not because we're avoiding something bad from happening. This is happening, and in order to start leveraging the technology, we need to make it safe and secure. And then I would go back to that tool slide, and I would tie it to those three things. Whatever we're investing in is that balancing of that portfolio. How are we doing on student safety? How are we doing on the interruption of the education process? And how are we doing in terms of enabling education and be a district that is known to stick with the times and leveraging technology?
Great, thank you. It's fairly quiet over here, and people may be getting ready for lunch, but our people in the session, we hit a high of about 56, 57 folks today to listen to your discussion. So that's, I think, great attendance. And if there are no other questions or any final thoughts, Fadi or Mac, that you'd like to give before we close this up and send people off for some kind of food.
No, I'd just like to say thank you for everybody coming, and thank you, Fadi. I've seen the presentation before, but it's always good, and I appreciate it, and appreciate you guys being a valued partner.
Yeah, I would say my closing remark here is that we need to remember that this is a debt situation that we have to kind of keep up with the times. If the more we postpone or put it off, it just becomes more expensive and more complicated. And actually, setting the eye on the prize here, the bigger conversation is not just the individual districts, but these are big problems, and solving them means coming together. And that's why I didn't get to that today, maybe at a different time, but that's why I'm excited about where we're going in terms of bridging the digital divide and using technology to get internet at the homes of students and families safely, and defending together in school districts coming together, even sanctioned by a Department of Education or a consortium to leverage, to plug our technologies with each other and be able to automate all of this, to orchestrate all of these defense mechanisms so we can focus on education enablement. So,
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again, Fadi, Mac. Appreciate all of you coming here. ACPE 2021. I know we're all looking forward to 2022 back in person, but this has been great so far. Great attendance, great sessions, and lots of good information. So thanks again to both of you, and thanks to everyone for coming. And we will see you all very soon. Next sessions are on your schedule, and have a great lunchtime or afternoon or walk around the block. See y'all soon.